There have been many cast members who have weathered every single storm of life below zero. Yet, one figure who immediately comes to mind is Glenn Villeneuve. He stood out as one of the most calming presences on the show. From the very beginning of the series until his departure in 2019, Glenn's journey captured the very essence of what it truly means to live off the grid. Because of him, fans were able to experience a window into life below zero in its rawest and most authentic form. His exit left many viewers puzzled. Why did he walk away without making any public announcements? And what really went on behind the cameras? Let's dive deeper to find out. When Life Below Zero first aired in 2013, it quickly took the world by storm. The show became a phenomenon thanks to its real-life stories, raw emotions, and unfiltered portrayal of survival in the wilderness. It was truly the gift that kept on giving, transporting viewers into the harshest corners of nature while igniting excitement, empathy, and a newfound appreciation for resilience. Each episode entertained and educated, giving fans both thrills and life lessons. Glenn Villeneuve's time on the show was a crucial part of that success. Glenn didn't just show survival, he brought his entire lifestyle to life, earning a unique place in the hearts of viewers who admired his bravery, perseverance, and deep spiritual connection to the wilderness. While the show's core was about the daily grind of survival, Glenn always sought something more profound. For him, the wilderness wasn't just about enduring hardships, it was about embracing adventure. From paragliding off snow-covered peaks to scaling ancient cliffs and trekking across towering summits, he craved experiences that reflected his spirit of exploration. This yearning for adventure sometimes clashed with the producer's strict formula for the show. They had a particular vision, but Glenn wasn't willing to limit himself to it. Still, despite the friction, Glenn remained committed to sharing stories that reflected the true essence of Alaska's wild soul. Unfortunately, things eventually turned sour, leading to his departure. For fans who had followed his every step, Glenn's exit felt like a tough pill to swallow. To truly understand what pushed him off the screen, we have to step back to where his story began, long before television fame came into the picture. Glenn Villeneuve was born on March 18, 1969, which makes him 55 years old today. His adventure-filled story began in Burlington, Vermont, years before Alaska became his home. As a child growing up in Vermont's forests, far removed from city distractions, Glenn discovered a passion for the outdoors that would shape his entire life. His family lived deep in the woods, and from a young age, he absorbed lessons about reading the land, surviving in the wild, and respecting nature. Aside from the knowledge passed down from his parents, Glenn sought out more. He studied wildlife, weather patterns, plants, and all the intricate lessons that nature had to teach. His education wasn't limited to books. He received serious practical training in hunting, fishing, crafting, and survival skills. This prepared him well for a future defined by wilderness living. Glenn's childhood wasn't just about learning, it was filled with adventure. At only 9 years old, he displayed the kind of courage and spirit usually seen in seasoned mountaineers. While other kids were figuring out shoelaces, Glenn was climbing the tallest mountains of Vermont, including Mount Mansfield. Adventure ran through his veins. Even at this young age, he realized he wanted more than the ordinary life. By 12, he had set off on a daring trip with his uncle from Massachusetts to the Canadian border. At 13, he returned to complete the journey solo after convincing his mother to let him try again. This determination and independence were qualities that defined him for life. Although his family eventually adopted modern conveniences like TV and the internet, Glenn remained anchored to his roots. He embraced a nomadic lifestyle, learning from the wilderness rather than society. It became clear that he wasn't just unique, he had a story that could one day captivate audiences around the world. When it came to formal education, Glenn was never one to follow the traditional route. He only lasted about a year in high school before dropping out. At 13, he tried to return, but he continued to leave and never advanced beyond 9th grade. He also never earned a GED. Glenn's heart wasn't in classrooms. He believed the real lessons in life came from experiences, adventures, and nature itself. By his 20s, Glenn found work as a freelance courier. To most people, it was just a job. To him, it was an opportunity to satisfy his endless curiosity, to travel and to learn. Travel had always been a part of him, and now it became a lifestyle. Long before he became famous on Life Below Zero, Glenn was already immersed in primitive living, embracing the role of a modern-day hunter-gatherer initially. He wanted to become a bush pilot and did earn a private pilot's license, flying planes for a time. But eventually, he realized his heart belonged to the wilderness. When he made the leap to Alaska, he began wondering how to turn his lifestyle into a livelihood. That was when he invited camera crews to document his life. Living among wolves, bears, and the unforgiving terrain was no joke. And Glenn knew that sharing these moments would fascinate people everywhere. For someone who lived in near total isolation, Glenn's journey onto television was unusual. After reaching out to National Geographic about a documentary, it took nearly 8 months before an executive producer responded. When they finally met, both sides agreed his life was worth showcasing. Ironically, Glenn didn't even know what a reality show was at the time. He had been out of touch with TV for so long, but he embraced the idea anyway. Glenn made his debut on Life Below Zero in 2013. He remained on the show until 2019, starring in 85 episodes. Over time, he became a fan favorite. People admired his calm, humble, and kind-hearted personality. Viewers not only wanted to see him on screen, but they also became fascinated with his private life. Was Glenn married? Did he share his wilderness with someone? The answers added yet another layer of intrigue to his story. Glenn's personal life was just as adventurous as his time in the wilderness. He was first married to Sylvia Day in 2001. Together, they shared years of rugged living, balancing time in the mountains with occasional returns to city life. Glenn once revealed that before bringing Sylvia to join him in Alaska, he spent 4 months living completely alone in the mountains. Their marriage eventually ended, but the experiences they shared were unforgettable. Later, Glenn found love again with Trisha Kazan. Their relationship began long distance. But eventually, Trisha left her job as an attorney in Boston to join him in the wilderness. She adapted wholeheartedly, and in 2017, they welcomed a daughter named Agatha. Fans were drawn into this side of his life, fascinated by how love could thrive under such harsh conditions. However, by 2013, their relationship faced struggles, and the two eventually went their separate ways. Despite the breakup, Glenn never downplayed the significance of their adventures together. For him, these relationships symbolized the strength of bonds formed in extreme conditions. Of course, Glenn's life wasn't just about love and peace, it was also about survival. His encounters with nature made for some of the most unforgettable stories. During the winter of 2006-2007, for instance, Glenn faced a desperate struggle. Running low on food in Alaska's unforgiving cold, he tracked a wounded caribou being hunted by a lone wolf. Determined to feed his family, he pursued the chase across dangerous slopes. Eventually, retrieved the caribou and fashioned a makeshift backpack from its ribcage to carry the meat home. But that wasn't its only wolf encounter. On another occasion, Glenn stumbled upon a pack of 20 wolves feasting on a fresh kill across a frozen lake. The scene was both terrifying and mesmerizing. When the pack noticed his cabin, they began charging across the ice with alarming speed. Armed with nothing but determination and his rifle, Glenn prepared to defend himself and those he cared about. With nerves of steel, he fired shots that echoed across the icy expanse, ultimately taking down 3 wolves. This was considered the ultimate move, a defining moment where Glenn proved he had the dominance and courage needed to defend his territory. Yet, despite his efforts, it wasn't enough to secure his position. The other wolves showed no signs of retreating, refusing to back down. Realizing the situation was turning against him, Glenn made the smart choice of retreating to the safety of his cabin. From there, his stories grew into something far more powerful. They became reminders of just how strong the human spirit can be when faced with danger. But even as his tales inspired others, one major question began circling in the minds of fans everywhere. Why did Glenn suddenly disappear from the show? Was there a hidden dispute that forced him off? Or was there another mystery behind his exit? This sparked a wave of curiosity surrounding Glenn's sudden departure from Life Below Zero. When Glenn Villeneuve left the show, viewers were left shocked and devastated. His exit in 2019 triggered endless speculation as fans searched desperately for answers. What had really gone wrong? Why would someone so central to the show vanish without warning? For a while, all anyone had were questions, till Glenn himself stepped forward with a revelation that only deepened the mystery. Glenn eventually addressed the rumors directly, choosing social media as his platform to tell his side of the story. He explained that the producers had no plans for him in future seasons. For many fans, this came as an enormous shock. How could someone who contributed so much simply be cast aside without even a proper goodbye or acknowledgement of his hard work? Glenn revealed that despite reaching out, he was met with silence from the production team. This lack of clarity only fueled the speculation. Later, during an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, Glenn hinted at creative differences with the producers. While this shed some light on the situation, it quickly became clear that the truth was more complicated than a simple disagreement. In reality, Glenn's exit wasn't caused by just one issue. Instead, it was the result of several conflicts building up over time. One of the biggest reasons was his frequent clashes with the crew and producers. As Glenn explained, living in the Brooks Range meant his expenses were minimal, sometimes as little as $300 a year in property tax for his cabin in Fairbanks. But filming a reality TV series in Alaska's brutal wilderness was no small task. It required discipline, coordination, and teamwork. And Glenn's fiercely independent nature often conflicted with those demands. He preferred to do things his own way, which didn't always align with what television production required. Disagreements began piling up, first about how scenes should be filmed, then about the overall direction of the show. Soon, these creative differences became recurring problems. On top of that, Glenn also had tense interactions with fellow cast members. While he had a reputation for being capable and tough, life in the wilderness meant stress was unavoidable. Survival often depended on teamwork, but Glenn's independent streak sometimes made cooperation difficult. Arguments flared up, whether about hunting territories, strategies, or simply clashing personalities. Another major concern was Glenn's tendency to break the rules. He would sometimes wander deep into the wilderness without informing the crew, vanishing for days at a time. This made it nearly impossible to capture his daily survival routine, which was the entire purpose of Life Below Zero. More worrying for the producers was Glenn's constant risk-taking. While danger is expected in Alaska's wilderness, Glenn often pushed it too far, disregarding basic safety guidelines. This left the crew anxious and fearing the worst. Eventually, producers concluded that continuing with Glenn had become too risky. This decision ultimately cost him his place on the show, but Glenn's life didn't end with his TV career. Away from the cameras, he proved he had plenty of options. For years, Glenn had been involved in real estate, managing and investing in properties to grow his wealth. He also dabbled in the stock market, studying trends and making smart investments. While his 6 years on television gave him widespread recognition and additional income, he never abandoned his other ventures. Instead, he built a diversified life where his money worked for him. It's not the other way around. Still, the wilderness had taken a heavy toll on him. Winters were brutal, testing both his body and his spirit. Glenn spent weeks hauling firewood through waist-deep snow, chopping ice holes in frozen lakes for water, and always knowing that a single mistake, whether slipping on river ice or mishandling an axe, could bring disaster. He spoke openly about injuries, like smashing his knees while carrying wood miles away from shelter, and being forced to improvise splints with no hospital nearby. Frostbite, deep cuts, and chronic back pain were constant threats. These weren't just minor hardships, they were daily reminders of how fragile survival could be, beyond the physical strain. There was also the crushing weight of isolation. Glenn endured months of solitude where the silence was deafening, broken only by the creak of ice or howling winds. His children, who split their time between Alaska and Vermont, sometimes went months without seeing him. Even when they did visit, the logistics were exhausting, requiring flights into remote areas only accessible by bush planes. Phone calls were rare, letters delayed. and relationships, whether family bonds or romantic ones, were put under immense strain. Although Glenn gained television fame, it didn't automatically guarantee financial security. Reality TV stars living off the grid didn't earn massive salaries. Expenses from bush flights to equipment repairs quickly added up. Glenn had to stretch every dollar, often relying on careful planning and other income streams to sustain himself. Life after life below zero brought new beginnings. Glenn settled in Fairbanks, Alaska, where he embraced life as a father to his daughter Agatha and as a partner to his girlfriend Chelaine. He never abandoned his hunter-gatherer ways and continued living close to nature in the Brooks Range. At the same time, he expanded into podcasting, sharing his insights and experiences with a wider audience. On social media, particularly Facebook, he built a following of over 100,000 people eager to hear from him. Through it all, Glenn Villeneuve stayed true to authenticity. Unlike many reality TV figures who leaned into scripted drama, Glenn insisted on truth. Even after stepping away from television, his influence on the world of wilderness living remained strong. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000, he proved his success extended far beyond the screen. But freedom always came with a cost: years of physical strain, emotional solitude, and sacrifices that viewers never fully saw on television. Glenn's story reminds us that survival isn't just about braving the cold. It's also about enduring long nights alone, missing family milestones, and still finding the strength to share wisdom with the world. His departure from life below zero may have been sudden and mysterious, but his journey shows that every ending can open the door to a new beginning. For fans, Glenn Villeneuve remains an unforgettable figure, one whose life continues to inspire, shock, and captivate. Glenn's journey after life below zero revealed even more about the man behind the wilderness legend. While viewers once knew him as the rugged survivalist battling Alaska's harshest conditions, life beyond the cameras showed a more personal side of his story. He wasn't just a lone wolf surviving against nature. He was a father, a partner, and a thinker who continued to find ways to adapt and thrive. In Fairbanks, Glenn carved out a new chapter of his life. His daughter Agatha became one of his central joys, reminding him daily why the sacrifices of the past were worth it. Being a father in such an environment was never easy. He had to balance providing for his family while still embracing the wilderness lifestyle that defined him. With his girlfriend, Chelaine, by his side, Glenn found stability and companionship, a stark contrast to the isolation he endured during his years deep in the Brooks Range. Still, Glenn never abandoned the lifestyle that made him who he was. The Brooks Range remained his playground, a vast wilderness where he continued to test his skills as a hunter and gatherer. For Glenn, survival was not just a necessity, but a philosophy, a way of proving that humans could still live in harmony with nature. Even after leaving television, he kept that connection alive, inspiring many who followed his journey online. One of the ways Glenn stayed connected with the outside world was through podcasting. Unlike the heavily edited structure of reality television, podcasts gave him freedom. He could share his stories in his own words, with no cuts, no scripts, and no producer interference. Listeners got an unfiltered view of his experiences, the dangers, the lessons, the humor, and the raw truth about living in the wilderness. Through his voice, fans felt like they were sitting beside him in his cabin. Listening to fireside tales of survival, Glenn also maintained a strong presence on social media. His Facebook page, boasting more than 100,000 followers, became a hub for people curious about his life after the show. There, he shared updates, reflections, and glimpses into the wilderness lifestyle. For many fans, this was their only window into the man they once watched every week on Life Below Zero, while television had cut ties abruptly. Glenn himself never disappeared. He simply chose a new way to share his journey, financially, and continued to stand on firm ground. His estimated net worth of around $500,000 was not built on television fame alone. He had long relied on smart investments, property management, and real estate ventures to ensure stability. He also played the stock market, carefully studying trends and making decisions that secured his financial independence. For Glenn, television had been one income stream among many, but it was never his entire foundation. Yet even with all his successes, Glenn never sugarcoated the reality of wilderness living. He openly admitted that freedom came with its costs. Every winter brought punishing physical strain, from joint pain to lingering back injuries that refused to heal. Nights of solitude often gave way to mental struggles, moments when the silence grew too loud and the isolation too heavy. Freedom was exhilarating, but it demanded sacrifices few people could endure, and that is what made Glenn Villeneuve so compelling. His story was never about glamour or scripted heroics, it was about authenticity. Viewers connected with him because he represented something rare. A man willing to step away from the comforts of modern life in exchange for truth, resilience, and a direct connection with nature. His departure from the show may have been wrapped in mystery and frustration, but his journey beyond it only deepened his legacy.